So I'm so happy. Yes, I'm completely
we are just family. Checking also my sister. We work together in Asheva for housing here.
Yeah. Then after that, my sister went to this big she worked for 15 years for them. Now it's retired. Yeah, Albert's wife. Yeah. Albert is again my distant cousin. Yeah.
And we used to meet on and off in the swimming pool.
Yeah. So which one is Som?
Som is my elder brother.
Oh,
I'm
Ram.
He's my brother.
Shyam. Oh, thanks. Yeah. You are a friend of Ram and you went to junior.
No, actually, Ramananda is junior to my brother's shop.
Oh, okay.
And then we turn out to be good friends.
Oh,
common
okay.
friend.
Oh.
And then we hang on.
Yeah. When I saw the topic, I think it is very interesting. Yeah. And this is very nice man. Thank you. See you later.
Check. Each and every one of you present here. Welcome to Jawaharlal Nehru Manipur Dance Academy Auditorium, Imphal for the third Gangmumei Kamei Memorial Lecture. On behalf of the organizing committee, we extend our appreciation for your presence today. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the President of the function, Professor Naorem Joykumar Singh, retired Professor of History, Manipur University. So I would like to request you to kindly come on the stage. And I also would like to request a resource person, Professor Tiplut Nongbri, retired Professor of Sociology, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Thank you so much. And now we will be having a presentation hour, and I would like to request Chairperson of GK Foundation, Mrs. Lansailu Kamei, to give away the token of love and appreciations for our President, Function President, and also for our resource person. Thank you so much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to continue with our formal program, and I would like to request Mr. Som Kamei, Postmaster General, Northeast 2 Region, to kindly deliver the formal welcome address.
A very good afternoon to all of you who have come gathered here today. On behalf of the GK Foundation, I would like to welcome a very special guest, Professor Tiplut Nongbri, an eminent sociologist of the country and a retired professor from JNU. She was also a colleague of my father, Professor Gangmumei Kamei, who have had academic interaction with Professor Nongbri over many years. I also like to extend a warm welcome to Professor N. Joykumar, who will preside over today's lecture. He is not only an advisor to the JK Foundation, but also like a close family member to all of us. His support and guidance to the foundation has been immense and immeasurable. Thank you, Baba, for everything. I warmly welcome all the guests and former students of my late father, his political supporters, and well-wishers for sparing their valuable time to be with us today. Your presence today is highly appreciated by the family. Today, I would also like to welcome all the friends and well-wishers who are joining us online through YouTube live streaming. Friends I would like to mention are some friends who are in Oxford University. Along with the students, they're attending the live session today. And also, I would also like to welcome friends from Canada and the US, in Chicago and also in New Jersey. I would also like to welcome all the online guests, especially from the Northeast Sociological Association, who are also MAM students and also attending this online lecture. My father, Professor Gangmumei Kamei, academic career spans over 40 years and 4 decades, and has written more than 15 major books and innumerable research papers and articles on various topics on history, anthropology, sociology, politics, and economy. He was a true advocate for interdisciplinary studies. To keep this legacy alive, the GK Foundation has been holding the annual GK Memorial Lectures by eminent academicians of the country, which first started in 2018, where the first inaugural lecture was delivered by an eminent historian, Professor J.B. Bhattacharya. I also welcome him. He's also online with us today. He's watching, I hope he's watching now. So I thank him for that, and also former Vice Chancellor of Assam University. It was also followed by another eminent anthropologist, Dr. S.B. Chakravarti, former presently Secretary General of the Asiatic Society, Kolkata. However, in the last 2 years, the foundation could not hold this memorial lecture due to the pandemic. Also this time, the GK Foundation, on the advice of the senior and well-wisher, we are holding the lectures on the 83rd birth anniversary of my father, Professor Gangmumei Kamei, which is today, for 21st October. He would have been 83 years old today. The GK Foundation has been carrying out certain charitable activities, including awarding meritorious students in board exams and sponsoring some needy and deserving students in their quest for meaningful education. The academic lecture which is being held today is a part of the endeavor of the foundation to involve in academic research to promote and propagate the ideas and vision of my late father based on his objective facts, humanism, and social equality. The GK Foundation hopes that these humble steps will lead to establishment of a well-endowed research institute of social science, which can play an important role in promoting understanding and harmony in a multi-ethnic and plural society in Manipur and Northeast India. I once again welcome this august gathering, and I express my gratitude to Professor Tiplut Nongbri once again, who have gracefully agreed to give this memorial lecture organized by the GK Foundation. We are highly honored, ma'am, to have you today for this memorial lecture. We look forward to today's lecture, and I'm sure everyone here will learn a lot from this lecture. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Som Kamei, Postmaster General, Northeast 2 Region, for warmly welcoming everyone present here and also for highlighting the objectives of GK Foundation. Thank you. And now continuing with our program, we have an introduction by Mrs. Mazakhon Kamei, HOD Sociology, Pranavananda Women's College, Dimapur. And I would like to request Mrs. Mazakhon Kamei to kindly take your time.
A warm good afternoon. Respected Principal Dr. Joykumar, retired Professor, Department of History, MU, and our esteemed Speaker of the Day, Ma'am Tiplut Nongbri, retired Professor of JNU. It's an honor and a privilege to introduce our esteemed speaker of the day, Ma'am Nongbri. For me, it's a sort of a mixed emotion because I happen to be one of her student, and I'm meeting her almost after 30 years, that is almost 3 decades. So, of course, last night I met her, and of course, ma'am didn't remember me, it was a long time back. So, but I'm proud to say that I'm one of her student, and I'm proud to give this introduction for her. Though, yes, last night when I met ma'am told me, don't make the introduction too long. She said, I felt embarrassed. But ma'am, sorry, I'll have to make it a bit long, though I have done my best, because ma'am has got such a illustrious, this academic, career, and I find it a bit hard to omit everything, though I tried my best to make the introduction a bit short. So, just now, Som Kamei has already given an introduction during his welcome speech. He has given a brief introduction of sort. So I like to add more. As you all know, that ma'am is a noted sociologist. In fact, she's one of an eminent sociologist of Northeast India. Actually, during our time when we were in JNU, there were hardly any faculty from Northeast India. And in fact, that time, ma'am represent the face of Northeast India. So today, those who are already acquainted with her, I think many of us are already familiar with ma'am academic achievement. But for the unversed, I'd like to read out some of her, Okay. Ma'am Nongbri is adorned with an impressive academic background. She has 35 years of teaching experience behind her. She's an alumni of Delhi School of Economics, Department of Sociology, University of Delhi. She had held many positions. She has served as a professor at Center for the Study of Social System, School of Social Science, Jawaharlal Nehru University. She also served as professor, Department of Sociology, Northeastern University for a short stint of 1 year. And after her retirement from JNU, she joined as a professor, Dr. Saifuddin Kichu Chair, Center for Northeast Studies and Policy Research, Jamia Millia Islamia. Then Ma'am Nongbri also served as a visiting professor at Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Simla. Besides, she is a recipient of many prestigious fellowships and awards. Postdoctoral, some of the fellowship and award are postdoctoral fellowship, Department of Sociology, Delhi University. She was also a recipient of British Council Fellowship in Gender and Development at Institute of Development Studies, University of Sussex, United Kingdom. Besides this, she has been awarded many fellowships by institutions, both from within the country as well as from outside the country. Ma'am has held many administrative and honorary positions as well. She was a convener Northeast Study Seminar Series, and she has served as Nodal Officer, Northeast Student Welfare, she was also a member of many advisory committees in numbers of universities over the years. And she has many academic publications to her credits. She has published about 40 research papers and 6 books and reports. And her areas of interest includes sociology of family and kinship, identity issue, ethnicity and tribes, environmental issues, natural resource management, and gender studies. So I feel ma'am is the right person to talk on the topic of the day, that is gender, customary laws, women representation in politics. As we all know that achieving gender parity is one of the most challenging issues facing the world, not just in the developing countries or backward countries. Even in the developed countries also, they are facing these challenges. And in India also, the women representation in politics is minimal, but I think if we compare with the scenario in Northeast India, I think it is worse. Of course, we all boast Northeast India, the status we all claim. Everyone sitting here also, at one type of your life, you must have mentioned that the status of the women compare, with the rest of the country, especially with the mainstream society in India, is higher. For especially people from Northeast India, we always boast about that. But in reality, we all know this thing. So we all know, if we compare with the other state, especially Eastern state, women's representation in politics, whether it is in assembly or in parliament, we all know it is minimal and negligible. And now, the question is, whether it is our customary practice, that is, impeding women participation in politics. I think these are some of the issue, the current issue, which is facing our society. If you remember, in recently also, like a state like Nagaland, recently, there was a strong resistance movement regarding this 33% reservation for women. And there was men folk as well as women folk, they fought tooth and nails against this 33% reservation in for women. But what I noticed at that time, I was very surprised. During that, this protest movement, women themselves, they are taking an active lead in imposing ban. So I was thinking, maybe the saying that women are women's greatest enemy seems to be true at that time. So women themselves are protesting against that 33% reservation for women. And those women who are taking active participation, means who are fighting for that 33% reservation, they were considered like a pariah that time. They got threatened, everything. So not just in Nagaland or other northeastern states, for example, Meghalaya. Ma'am is the native of Meghalaya, her home state. There also we have matrilineal system. So people, are, general perception about matrilineal society is women are dominant, women are in authority. But still, at home front, they may have an authority, but many studies have revealed, and the facts and figures have revealed that even the participation of Khasi women or like women from Meghalaya, let's say, Khasi is not the only tribe from Meghalaya. So even their participation in politics is minimal. Of course, few, compared to a state like Nagaland, they have a higher representation, but even in parliament also, till now, we have only one MP so far. So Meghalaya, a state, one of the small, let's say, remaining society which still practice matrilineal, even there also the participation of women is negligible and minimal. So what is the reason behind that? So first we said that most of our society, Northeast Indian India, are patrilineal. Okay, what's about matrilineal society like Khasi? Why is their women's participation is still minimal? So is it the customary law, or are we already socially conditioned by our customary practices or customary belief that women should not, a woman place is not in politics? Politics is mainly a male domains. So these are the things, I think, are the issue. So, in many academic forums over the year, many people have discussed in the seminar, but it's end with the seminar. After we move off from the seminar, everything nikal gaya from the thing. So, considering all these things, I think from today, lecture from Ma'am Nongbri. Ma'am Nongbri is an authority in this gender studies, and being a person from Northeast India who has first-hand experience with all this thing regarding this poor representation of women in politics and vis-a-vis this customary social practices. So I think GK Foundation, they have done a good job by inviting Ma'am Nongbri to speak, on this topic. I think with her well of, first-hand experience as well as and her well of knowledge in this area, she will be able to enlighten with us. Okay, so. Actually, we all are, whoever is present, all the guests, I think we are really fortunate to be here, with Ma'am Nongbri. And every one of us, I believe that when we live this, okay, we will live with a new perception about this issue. And I hope everyone who is present here, we all will go home, with a new perception about this issue, and each one of us will play a, role in bringing about change or in bringing this thing, parity. Gender parity in this thing, political representation. So, ma'am, thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. And ma'am, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Majakon Kamei, HOD Sociology, Prabhavananda Women's College, Dimapur, for your well introduction and also for letting us know in details the activities done by our speaker. And now we have with us Professor Tiplut Nongbri, retired Professor of Sociology, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, to deliver the memorial lecture on gender, customary law and women's representation in politics.
Extremely sorry. It's lights. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Respected Mr. Chairman, Professor Joykumar, and all the distinguished audience who are present here this afternoon. First of all, I would like to convey my thanks to the person who spoke before me, introducing me, for her very over-generous introduction. And to be really honest, I feel extremely embarrassed about it, because what she said really is not true, of me, as you will certainly find out, when I speak. And also, I would like to thank her for covering many of the grounds which I thought I would be touching here this afternoon. It makes it easier for me, and for those of you who feel that there's some inadequacy, you can catch hold of Machakon. She'll be able to tell you more. Thank you very much, Machakon, and thank you very much to the JK Foundation for organizing this lecture, which is really a tribute to the memory of Professor Gangmumei Kamei, an eminent and erudite statesman and scholar who's been a source of inspiration for many of us. And I also would like to congratulate the family for setting up the foundation in his name. And I offer you my best wishes for the commendable attempt that you are making to take his legacy forward. And also, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this celebration here this afternoon. I really deem it a privilege and a great honor, especially to be speaking, on this occasion, in memory of Professor Gangmumei Kamei, as I said just now, a very popular, famous, and erudite personality. Thank you very much. So the topic that I will be speaking here this afternoon, as has been notified in the various notices sent to all of you, is gender, customary law, and women's representation in politics. The choice of the topic has been dictated partly by my interest in gender issues and partly by the recent elevation of a tribal woman to the highest constitutional post in the country. The election of Mrs. Draupadi Murmu as the 15th President of India has been widely lauded as a historic moment for the tribes and indigenous peoples of India. For the first time, a member of the tribal community is elevated from their historically marginalized position to the highest constitutional seat in the country. What is more remarkable is that it is not a man, as is generally the case, but a woman who is at the center of this historic event. In her acceptance speech, the newly elected president credits the election to India's democracy. It is a testament of the strength of her democracy, she states, that the daughter born into a poor and remote tribal family can hold the highest constitutional position in India. The optimism her speech exudes and her tacit belief that her election reflects the dreams and potential of crores of women and daughters in India has put the spotlight on tribal women and their place in politics. Women's representation in politics, as we all know, has been a highly contentious issue that has struck the country both within and outside Parliament for a long time. That a tribal woman has made it to the top position against all odds certainly calls for close examination of the matter. However, I will not be speaking on the recent presidential election or on what makes the NDA government put up the present incumbent as its candidate. The issue is beyond the scope of this lecture. I would rather leave this matter to political analysts and commentators to address it. What I would be doing here is to take a close look at the position of tribal women, their political rights and responsibilities, and the challenges they face vis-a-vis the customary law and practices and the state. Within the ethnographic context of Northeast India, a region that has a high concentration of tribal communities. At this point, I would like to make a small clarification. While the major focus of today's discussion is on tribal women and their place in politics, I have also referred to the contributions made by the Manipuri women. I made this clarification because of the fact that, as we all understand, the Meiteis or the Manipuris are not really designated as scheduled tribes, as is spelled out by the Indian Constitution in Article 342. Nonetheless, Manipuris or the Meiteis, they have a shared history with the Nagas and other tribal groups in Northeast India. And this shared history and cultural similarity between them also means that we cannot really hope to fully understand the struggles and challenges that tribal women face unless we also take note of the contribution that the Meiteis make. So I thought with this clarification, in case there's some misunderstanding, that I'm trying to club the Meiteis and the tribes together, because while the majority of the communities in Northeast, tribal communities, are designated as scheduled tribes, the Meiteis are not. So the reason why I've tried to club them together is because of their shared political history, though they had taken the different trajectories in their ideological journeys. The similarities between them are very much there. So the material that constitutes the core of this lecture is derived from different sources, from conversations with men and women in the field, from articles in books and journals, from media reports, and also from my own personal experience teaching, researching on tribal issues, as well as also being a tribal woman with a brief stint in politics. The theoretical framework that informs the discussion is drawn from feminist literature that views gender not as naturally given, nor as a biological fact of life, but as socially and culturally constituted. Neither does it view gender as a monolithic entity that stands on its own, but gender is actually mediated by a number of variables that impinge on a person's life. So therefore, how a person is located vis-a-vis these different variables would shape that person's gender experience. This is the theoretical framework on which I proceed to discuss this lecture today. The lecture is organized in 3 parts. The first part looks at the place of gender in tribal studies and how tribal women are portrayed in scholarly works and popular discourse. In the second part, I turned to tribal customary law and see how these laws shape the lives of women. The lecture then concludes by looking at some of the measures that could be adopted to resolve the problems of women's subordination and marginalization in public life. To begin with, the issue of gender has received serious attention in scholarly works in India. The same, however, cannot be said in the context of tribes. Not only is there a paucity of material on the issue, the problem has also been further complicated by the stereotype idea that tribal societies are free of gender discrimination. Several factors contributed to this line of thinking. First, the supposedly egalitarian character of tribal social structure, marked as it were by a relative absence of caste and class distinction, as is the case with the general society. Second, in many tribal societies, what you find is a very high percentage of women actively involved in the system of production, which accounts for their visibility in the public place and also for their low dependence upon men for their survival. And thirdly, when we look at the data on tribes in general, we will discover that despite their backwardness, despite this subordination, we find that tribal women happen to better perform in some of the development indicators, such as sex ratio and also literacy rate, in comparison to their counterparts in other marginalized groups. So drawing inferences from these characteristics, tribal women are depicted as having superior social status as compared to women in other societies. Yet, I would like to say, this glorified picture of tribal women is not only a gross over generalization, but also based on a segmental view of the society by comparing their position with women in non-tribal societies while ignoring their position vis-a-vis men in their own society. While this comparison of tribal women with their counterparts in the non-tribal society may have provided us with an idea of their position in the generalized category of women, it tells us very little about their position in their own society. For example, how do women, or how do tribal women fare vis-a-vis men in their society? What are their rights and responsibilities assigned by customs and practices in comparison to their male counterparts? To understand this, we need to shift the focus from women as an isolated category, or women in comparison to women in non-tribal societies, but to look at the position of women in tribal societies in relation to the position of men in their own society. In other words, we need to adopt a gender perspective. A focus on gender means that we look at men and women together and the factors that structure their relations. Evidence suggests that power, that is the ability to assert one's influence over the other, is an important element that mediates the relation between the sexes. Though the degree and form may vary from context to context. According to feminists, unequal power relations are kept in place because the actors involved, both the dominant and the subordinates, subscribe to accounts of social reality which deny that such social injustice exists. As stated earlier, what further adds to the tenacity of this problem is that though rooted in patriarchy, gender inequality feeds on other forms of social inequality such as caste, class, sexuality, ethnicity, race, etc. So what this suggests is, just as women cannot be viewed in isolation from men, gender inequality cannot be fully understood unless related to the broader context and situations within which it is embedded. Popular notions of tribal women suffer from want of this holistic perspective. Most ideas on tribal women are based on a narrow view of their reproductive role, primarily as mother, wife, and worker, without taking into consideration their power relations with men and the wider structures and processes that impinge on their life. This has not only resulted in a distortion of the reality, but also to the neglect of many important aspects of their life. So let us look at what are those factors that contribute to women's subordination. A major source of subordination of tribal women is customary law, which comprises the mores, customs, rites, precepts, and usages practiced from time immemorial. Rooted in tradition and backed by sanctions, customary law regulates every aspect of a person's life. It defines their identity, determines their rights to property and political and social offices, as well as also customary law basically prescribes the social and moral codes of conduct to follow for men and women in the society. What is distinctive about tribal customary law is the difference in the way in which the rules and norms are applied to men and women. All the rules relating to marriage, divorce, succession, inheritance are invariably in favor of men. Evidence from several communities in the Northeast show that tribal customary laws are highly discriminatory to women, with a number of exclusionary practices that deny women equal access to the social, economic, and political resources and opportunities that exist in society. Women are not only denied equal rights to property, they're also viewed as social minors who cannot be entrusted with important matters. Barring the Khasi, Jaintia, and Garos, who subscribe to the maternal principle of kinship, the system of inheritance among most tribes is in favor of men. Women are entitled only to maintenance rights and expenses for marriage. while men inherit land and all other movable and immovable properties. Even in matrilineal societies, where the woman is regarded as the perpetuator of the family and the clan, and also we women are also given rights of property. But when it comes to land, we find that the society makes a clear distinction between ownership and control. While ownership of land traverses in a female line, control over it lies in men. So therefore, if you look at Khasi society, the Khado or the heiress daughter, who's supposed to be really the person who inherits the bulk of the family property, does not really have the right to use the property in any manner that she likes, unless her male matricide agree to it, because controlling power lies in the hands of men, not in the hands of women. Similarly, if we look at patrilineal societies, we find that wherever women have access to land, they only enjoy usufructory rights, while proprietorial right lies with men. In general, women's rights to land are contingent on their remaining unmarried, or they have no brothers, or they are widowed. Even in these situations, you find that women's full right to their property is not really guaranteed. In matters of marriage and divorce too, tribal customary laws are far from favorable to women, despite the popular perception that tribal women have greater control over their sexuality. Several repressive customs such as child marriage, forced marriage, and polygyny are also widely practiced in many communities. For instance, among several tribes in Arunachal Pradesh, women are treated as mere commodities whom men could easily procure through financial settlement in the form of bride price. Ironically, the system of bride price, which was originally intended to compensate the bride's family for the loss of an economically active member, ends up reducing women to mere commodities. So as a result of which, you find that many women in Arunachal Pradesh, which has also been backed up by studies and also through casual conversations with some of the members of the tribe from the state, reveals that they're extremely unhappy with the system of practice of a bride price that exists in their society. So what I would like to say is that the system of bride price has actually proved to be a bane for women and lies at the root of the proliferation of polygynous unions, as wealthy men can take on number of wives simply by paying an agreed sum of money to the girl's family. The brides themselves have little say in the matter, as they're generally forced to marry in childhood. What also adds to the injustice to these women is the silence of the community on the number of wives a man may have. So therefore, what we find is that as women cannot actually initiate divorce because they'll have to pay back the bride price. So we find that they ended up being rejected by the husband if they become older, while the husband turned to younger women, for concubinage as well as for marriage. So several women spoken to have stated that the prevalence of bride price in their society places constraint on women to initiate divorce, as it entails the obligation to return the bride price. So therefore, even if they're ill-treated, they would rather stay within a marriage than get out of it because of their inability to pay back the bride price. So it's not only in situations where institution of bride price exist. Even in societies without bride price, you find that among many tribal societies in the region, rules regarding moral and sexual transgression are enforced more stringently on women than men. Women are expected to conform to high moral standards and conduct while no such strictures are applied to men. According to a study conducted by one of my research scholars on the mesos, she stated that a woman who commits adultery, will be turned out of the house naked, be forced to return the bride price, and deprived of her dowry, whereas no such strictures are applied to men. In my own society, the Khasi community from Meghalaya, in my society, adultery as an offense applies only to women. A woman cannot remarry or have sexual liaison with other men in the lifetime of her husband or within 1 year of his death. A widow who marries before the end of the stipulated period can be subjected to penal action and stands to lose the property that her husband possessed. There is no such deterrence for men in the Khasi society, as is the case with women. On the contrary, a man with several wives is looked up with admiration as a bearer of 12 flags. There is a saying among Khasi, if a man has many wives, they say that he is orang khat arlama, or a person who can wheel or can raise up 12 flags. What is also a matter of concern is that this prejudicial custom has been recently upheld by the Khasi Hills Autonomous District Council in its bill, which was tabled in 2021 and is still awaiting the governor's assent to it. The bill says a widow marrying with another man within a year of the husband's death stands to lose his property, will only go to the children and not to her. Now the implication of this provision becomes clear when we compare it with another provision with regards to the right of man. So in the under the head Loss of Rights of Inheritance, section 13, the bill states, it is the right of the husband. Okay, it says the bill not only condones the sexual transgression by men, it also supports them in the illicit act. So we find that the article says that if a man makes a will, willing the property to his second wife, whether he's legally married to her or not, then the property, when he dies, will go to her and the children born. So this kind of double standards which exist, in this provision of the bill is extremely worrying, for many of us. It is worrying because 75 years the country has passed through independence, but yet our councillors and our legislators do not see anything wrong in the double standards in the law. What is also a matter of more concern is that in the Khasi Hills Autonomous District Council, when this bill was tabled, there were 2 women councillors present in it, and one of them happened to be a member, of a committee holding charge of marriage and divorce. Yet, neither of them raised any question on this highly prejudicial bill, which is disastrous for the interests of their fellow women sisters. So what it seems to me is that the negligible presence, perhaps, in the district council, 2 women in a house of 30 members, and also perhaps their long years of being in the political wilderness have stifled their voice and rendered their presence in the district council completely ineffective to bring about the desired change in the law, which would have been able to undo the injustices which the Khasi customary law does to women. Now, when we turn to the other aspects of the customary law, we find that the gravest injustice tribal customary law inflicts on women that has serious consequences on their life in contemporary times is their exclusion from politics. Politics is viewed exclusively as men's domain, from which women are traditionally excluded. This is true of practically all tribal groups in the region. Barring some legendary figures, women as a category are excluded from decision-making bodies like village and tribal councils. A number of factors are cited in defense of this practice. A political commentator in the state of Meghalaya, in a recently published book, pointed out that women's place is in the home, so it is not necessary for them to venture into politics, as they are represented by their uncles. Besides, darbars, that is a village council, are charged by spirits which are invoked to give legitimacy to decisions. So he says, this means it is not proper for a woman who carries in her person the faculty of conceiving and giving birth to be involved in communication with spiritual beings. I don't know how you all feel about this kind of a statement coming from a political commentator, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm really stumped by the rationale provided by the scholar or by the commentator, the analyst in this case. You know, how is it easy for us to understand why women's reproductive capacity should disqualify them from taking part in politics? And why is it? Because women bear children, they cannot communicate with spiritual beings. It really defies imagination and the rationale provided by these scholars. But what is crystal clear is that by using women's reproductive function as an excuse, men ensure they have full control of the political arena. Among the Nagas, women's exclusion from politics stem from the belief that women are immature and unable to keep secrets. I derived this information in conversation with a highly established Naga scholar and also cross-check it with some of the Naga students in Delhi. So it says allowing women entry into the tribal councils and participate in decision-making process could compromise the interests of the tribe. I think it's easy for us to understand why it's so, because we know that Naga society is really racked by intermittent conflict between villages and between clans. So therefore, maintaining secrecy on the activities of the tribe is of utmost importance. But be that as it may, why is it, if men can maintain secret, why is it only women are deemed to be untrustworthy? Why women are seen to be unreliable? It defies imagination again. I think these are really ideas that are based on mere speculation and not really based on actual fact. But be that as it may, this is being used as a reason to disqualify women from taking part in politics. So the belief that women are gullible and untrustworthy by nature disqualifies them from taking part in politics. Among some Naga tribes, women are described as nafinale. I understand this is a Mau word, which means young or immature, to underscore the fact that they cannot be trusted. These kind of stereotype ideas, which society really has about women's capacity or women's trustworthiness and reliability for taking part in politics, has also resulted in the huge resistance to their political participation, which my introducer has just highlighted a short while ago. The opposition to women's political participation is so deeply entrenched that a call for women's change by women's group was met by stiff resistance from men in general and the male-dominated tribal councils in particular. And in this case, I would like to say that Nagaland basically provides a classic example which mirrors the kind of challenges that women face in the struggle for social and political empowerment. Women activists and women's associations in the state had to go through prolonged legal battle to fight for women's rights. The male-dominated tribal bodies vehemently opposed women's demand for participation in politics, claiming that this goes against their customary laws and practices. So again, customary laws and practices is used really, as a scapegoat to deny women access to political participation. Even the state did little to come to women's aid. On the contrary, in 2012, the Nagaland Assembly adopted a resolution rejecting women's reservation in urban local bodies, saying that this violates provision Article 371A, which guarantees safeguards to the customs and practices, of the Nagas and other tribal communities, with respect to their customary law and the religious and cultural practices. After a lengthy legal battle in High Court, the women's group took the matter to the Supreme Court, which struck down the resolution and passed an order directing the state government to immediately hold the election to the local bodies and implement the provision of 33% reservation. The government was given 2 months to comply with the order. Many months have passed. I don't have any information actually what is the state of affairs at this time. Has the Nagaland government gone ahead to listen and comply to the order passed by the Supreme Court, or is it still dilly-dallying? That I have no idea. It is a matter, I think, for many of us to look closely into the matter. It is not the traditional councils alone that shut its doors on women. Even the modern institution of governance, with its proclaimed commitment to the principles of democracy and social justice, appears to be equally discriminatory towards women. The whole of tradition is so intense that even where no restrictions exist for women's participation, female candidates find it difficult to cross the hurdle and make it to the hallowed House of Representatives. The meager presence of women in the state legislatures and autonomous district councils is illustrative of this fact. Again, Nagaland stands as an example. In its almost 60-odd years of statehood, apart from 2 women parliamentarians, one of which I think elected just recently this year itself, the Rajya Sabha, not a single woman has made it to the State Legislative Assembly. According to one source, of 21 women candidates who have contested assembly elections in Nagaland over the years, none has won and 13 lost their deposits at the hustings. This poor track record has made it difficult for women to even get tickets from political parties to contest in the elections. So turning our attention to states where women have been able to enter the political or electoral fray, we discover that the picture is not very positive either. There is a mixed picture. While there has been a marginal increase in women's representation in Manipur and Meghalaya, 5 women, I think, made it to the state legislature in its recently held election in the state of Manipur, which has been hailed by the media as a very historic phenomenon. And 4 in Meghalaya, we find that the other states have not fared so well. Now take Mizoram, for example, which has become a state in the last 45 years now, and also which has produced 1 MLA each in the 4 years that elections were held, 1978, 1984, 1987, and 2004. In 2018, not a single woman made it to the to the Legislative Assembly in Mizoram. It is also significant that the 4th woman MLA was elected after a gap of 27 years, only to be followed by a duck in the next election. So when I talked to friends from the Mizo society, I was told that Mizoram is a gender-friendly state. Mizos do not believe in gender inequality. Women are given lots of freedom and privileges. Yet if you go by the figures of women being able to gain entry into politics, you find that women's representation continues to be a highly problematic issue, even in a state like Mizoram, which claims to be gender-friendly. Now, looking at the neighboring state of Assam, we find that the data for Assam also is not very positive. In fact, Assam shows progressive decline in the number of women representatives in the state assembly, from 14 women MLAs in 2011 to 8 in 2016 and to 6 in 2021. What is also very interesting, if you look at the picture of women's representation in politics in the context of Northeast India, is that the women's representation in the political forum in Northeast India is characterized by what is known as dynastic politics, highly dynastic in character. Except for a few, most of the elected women are the wife, mother, daughter, or daughter-in-law of male politicians. Meghalaya takes a lead in this regard. Of the 4 women MLAs in this current house, 2 are daughters of former ministers and MP, and 1 the wife of a former chief minister and leader of the opposition. And in fact, 2 of the current MLAs in the Meghalaya State Assembly are related to each other as mother and daughter, and with their father and husband also part of the house. The lone woman MP from the state is the daughter and sister of Meghalaya's first political family, which has produced 2 chief ministers and a speaker of the Lok Sabha. And interestingly, all the 3 siblings from this family are currently elected representatives, but 2 of them really are holding the reign of affairs in the state of Meghalaya. Similarly, in Assam, of the 6 women elected in 2021, 3 come from political families. 1, the wife of a former Congress leader killed by Ulfa, the other a daughter of a former union minister, and the third has double political connections as a daughter of a former MLA and daughter-in-law of a former chief minister. So moving north towards Arunachal Pradesh, we find that the picture is not very different. All 3 women MLAs in Arunachal Pradesh Assembly elected in 2019 hail from political families. 1 a wife of a former CM, another a wife of a former MLA, and a third a daughter-in-law of a former member of the Rajya Sabha. So when we look at the facts that are documented and enumerated before you, really confirms the view held by feminists that few women politicians have an independent political base. Many, in fact, are used as proxies by their male relatives to protect the seats from their opponents till such time the male member can reclaim them. While the clout and support extended by the family makes it easier for women to enter politics, it also imposes serious constraints on their autonomy and ability to influence legislative outcomes that would be favorable, of their gender, or that would be favorable towards their fellow sisters. The case of Rabri Devi in Bihar, who came to power as a substitute for a husband, illustrates this fact. Despite holding the office of a chief minister, Rabri Devi would not go against the stand of her husband's party, the RJD, on women's reservation to support the demand of women's activists across the country to provide 33% reservation for women in state assemblies and parliament. Closer home, we are yet to hear of a woman politician who is able to challenge the male-dominated status quo and come up with policies that could influence or could alter the unequal power relations between men and women. Even on issues that has little to do with women or threaten the gender equation, few female politicians could defy the family and or the party line, even if it goes against the sentiment and preference of the electorate she represents. Akatha Sauma, my MP from Meghalaya, voting in favor of CAA in Parliament, along with the BJP, an ally of her brother's political party, the NPP, despite the widespread anti-CAA protest in her constituency, is a case in point. I think all of you are familiar with this story. Elsewhere in the country, women's empowerment has been thwarted by what analysts describe as the Sarpanch Party phenomenon. Sarpanch Party, it is not a term which is very familiar for us in the Northeast. I think we have our own term. But this is a term which really has taken the cake out of women's struggle for political empowerment. Because Sarpanch party as a phenomenon is basically a phenomenon where women are elected to the Panchayati Raj institution. They went through election, got elected, but were not given the opportunity by their male family members to discharge their political duties. In fact, in a bizarre case reported just about 3 months ago from Madhya Pradesh, Sagar and Damoh district, out of 10 women elected Panchayat members, only 3 were able to take the oath of office in secrecy personally. The other 7, their husband and other male members, went and took the oath of secrecy and oath of office for them. So this kind of bizarre kind of situation can only happen in a country like India, where women are really oppressed, where women are really discriminated. I do hope that we do not have that kind of a situation here in Northeast India. But nonetheless, this is a phenomenon which is very much similar to what the feminists call the Beti Bibi Brigade, where women are really just proxies of their male relative in the political forum. So even Prime Minister Narendra Modi had taken note of this fact and made a public statement that the Sarpanch party phenomenon has been the root cause of the problem that stands in the way of women's empowerment in India. So the critical question that emerged at this juncture is, how do we ensure that female politicians take their mandate seriously when they represent, when they are elected to political office? Do they really represent the interests of their female sisters as we would like them to do? Answer to this question is critical if we are to ensure that women's representatives in politics make a difference to women by coming up with or supporting policies that are beneficial for women. Feminist scholars in the West attribute the failure of women politicians to come up with policies that are supportive of the interests of their fellow sisters to their poor numerical strength in the legislature of parliament. Because since men are the majority, the women are smaller in number, so therefore their poor numerical strength make it impossible for them to go against the majoritarian rule. So therefore, if you want to ensure that women have an effective say and come up with legislative outcomes that are really beneficial for women, then we need to increase the strength or the number of women representation in parliament, in the state legislature, or the district council at the different levels of the political forum. So known as the critical mass theory, subscribers to this view are convinced that bringing in more women into politics can infuse more empathy for women's cause and create a more gender equal society. Doubtless, we cannot dispute the logic of this argument, because there certainly is a correlation between number and outcome, especially in a democracy based on majoritarian rule. Larger number can certainly influence, better outcome. However, I also would like to insert a note of caution that number by itself is not a sufficient condition to bring about the desired result if the overall condition is not conducive, especially in matters relating to women. So if that is the case, we are faced with another question. How do we bring in more women to politics to attain the critical mass when the ecosystem within which they are embedded is highly prejudicial towards women, providing the little space to negotiate? Is that really the case? I think to understand the meaning of this question and relate it to the situation in Northeast India, I think I would like to take a brief step back into history and look at the history of women activism in the context of Northeast India. Because the tribal customary laws and customary laws of even non-tribal societies for that matter have always been projecting women as inept, incapable, passive, therefore have no leadership qualities, therefore social minors, therefore deny them access to political participation. What does the history of women activism in Northeast tell us? Is this really true? Or does it disprove this contention espoused by our customary laws and practices? So I'm sorry if I've taken too long, but I feel that to really understand the situation properly, we need to critically examine the role of women in activism in the context of Northeast India, because Northeast India has had a long history of women activism, which has shown that women are not really inept, women are not really devoid of political skills or leadership quality. And in this regard, I would like to say that Manipur really provides the role model for this, where we have seen that during the colonial period, the women of Manipur mobilized themselves into a powerful force to question the repressive policy of the colonial government, where forced recruitment of labor, of men, to make them go and fetch wood from highly hazardous areas to be able to get wood to construct the burned down police station. It was the women who came to the rescue of their men in what is known as the Nupi land. And of course, the Nupi land is, I would say, is a household name. It is a household narrative, which many people are familiar with. Similarly, in 1939, it was again the women who mobilized themselves against the colonial policy which allowed the Marwaris to export rice, while the local population were left to face starvation because of the scarcity of rice. So all this was really mobilized, organized, and spearheaded by women, which just goes to prove that women do not lack leadership quality, that women are not passive acquires to the kind of norms and ideas postulated by their customary laws and practices. We find that this is not only in the context of Manipur, but to go back to Manipur again, the Nupi land provided the role model for the formation of the Maira Paibis, which exists today in a very strong form, which are playing a very important role, a catalytic role in trying to root out corruption, in trying to root out social evils, and in trying to speak, on behalf of the poor and the downtrodden. And also one of the most important spokespersons against human rights violations, both by the state and non-state actors. I think we are all still very fresh in our minds what happened in 2014, or is it 2004, when at Kangla Fort here, the so-called nude protest by a dozen Maira Paibis, was organized, which shamed the Assam Rifles and the Indian government. So this is the kind of role that women are capable of carrying out, which completely defies and rejects and demolishes the argument made by our customary laws and practices that women as social minors should be kept out of politics. So this is not only the case of Manipur. We find the same kind of experiences also in Nagaland. The NMA, the Naga Mothers Association, which again played a very catalytic role in trying to bring and usher peace in the state, in working and trying to eradicate social evils, drug abuse, human trafficking. And again, it is the Naga Mothers Association and allied organizations which undertook a prolonged legal battle to fight for women's rights. So the recent Supreme Court ruling, which I mentioned earlier, directing the state government to organize election in the state is really a big boost to women activism, and also justifies our claim, the claim of feminists, that women are as much competent as men are to take part in political affairs. We find that in the state of Meghalaya also, there is a new consciousness which is coming up. Excuse me. think in comparison to other states in the Northeast, Meghalaya is a relatively peaceful state, which has not really seen that much of women activism, as we've seen in the state of Nagaland or Manipur for that matter. But we have also seen that in recent times, women activism, is increasing in Meghalaya because of the inability of the male political run bodies to put down corruption, to eradicate social evils in the society. So it's left to the women really to come forward to speak out against it. So we've seen in Meghalaya persons like Agnes Kharchiyeng, who single-handedly fought against the coal mafia, because despite the Supreme Court ruling, which has banned the illegal mining of coal and the illegal transportation of coal, coal transportation still takes place at a very active rate. So much so, since coal mining doesn't come under the Industrial Act. So all kinds of irregular practices take place in coal mining, which has left and exposed many coal miners to deaths and accidents. So therefore, since the state was not taking any responsibility or any charge in putting down these kind of illegal practices, it was left to the women to come up, to speak out against it. So women activism in Meghalaya also has increased by leaps and bounds. So this is just to show that, that women, the illustrations that I'm giving here is to show that the argument made out by customary laws and practices that women cannot take part in politics because they do not have the wherewithal for it really is not justifiable. Because facts reveal that women are as competent as men in running affairs of the country, the society, and the community. So what does it need to do? What is needed now to do? So should we go along and subscribe to the views of the customary laws and practices and continue to keep women out from political participation in a formal way? I think the facts that have been presented before us, rejects that idea. What needed to be done now is that women really should mobilize themselves and come together to fight for their rights and negotiate with the state and other democratic institutions for their support. And this also requires that the state also on its part should not rescind on its obligation to bring about the political participation of women, but really comply with the order passed by the Supreme Court and also listened to the demands and the struggles made by women's groups across the country, across the state, across communities. And also, we need to ensure that the phenomenon like Sarpanch Beti or the Beti Bibi phenomenon, which reduces women to mere proxies, is not repeated. And this can happen only if concerted effort is being made by the state, by the community, and women's groups together to fight for women's right and political participation. But what is necessary to achieve this is not only consciousness raising at the political level alone. We also need to go back to the basics to ensure that the subordination of women is not carried out in a systematic manner in which is being carried out today. I'm saying this because women's subordination really has its roots in patriarchy, and patriarchy as a concept is shaped and nurtured within the family. It is within the family that gender ideas about maleness and femaleness are really shaped and transmitted. So unless and until we go back to the basics and re-look and re-examine a socialization process within the family, we'll not really be able to achieve the goal which we want to achieve, that is providing entry to women in politics. To do that, we first of all have to, apart from preservation of seats for women, we need to also revisit basic structures of family and schools to ensure that the socialization process that we carry out does not continue to perpetuate gender inequality. How does this affect this? How does this work? This works basically by inculcating ideas of difference between male and female, but the way in which we tend to assign roles and responsibilities differently to girl child and a boy child. While the boy child is usually given duties that demand decisiveness and action which are carried out in a public place, girls are usually assigned duties of child rearing and child caring, which are seen to be conducive with the child and reproductive roles. So this kind of stereotype idea, in the end, would end up inculcating gender ideas in the male and female child, which they carry over to their adulthood. And secondly also, but it is within a family that we use certain words and phrases about men and women unthinkingly, which are internalized by the members within it. I can give you an example from my own society. Among the Khasi, there is a saying that men have 12 units of strength and women has only 1 unit of strength. So while this statement may appear to be natural and innocent because it basically refers to the physiological attributes that men and women have, but actually, when this kind of an idea becomes the basis for the allocation of rights and responsibilities within the family, which invariably works in favor of the male and not against the female, then such kind of ideas, only end up perpetuating gender inequality. I think in many tribal societies, such kind of words are not absent. It is not only present in Meghalaya, and I'm sure it must be there. And I invite each one of you to look back into the vocabulary that you use in your daily speech. How much of these terms and phrases that you use innocently and thinkingly are really conducive for creating a gender equal society? Because the extent to which we can create equality between male and female, and the extent to which we can generate or bring up a society that respects both the sexes equally would be dependent also on the kind of socialization process to which they've been subjected to. And I think a family has a very great role to play in this. So that is the reason why I feel that I need to invite you all to look back at your own respective family and see how is the socialization that we carry out in our families with respect to our children. In what way is it contributing to creating a gender equal society? If there is some fault in this, I think it's time for us to change and chart out a new path which can create and lead to a more gender equal society. It is not families alone that needs reform, that needs re-examination. Another institution which also contributes significantly to the perpetuation of gender inequality and the continuing subordination of women are schools. Recently, a group of scholars in the United Kingdom had written a letter to the Secretary of Education, calling the Secretary to examine the language being used in the UK schools, which tend to perpetuate gender inequality. So taking a hint from this letter, written by this group of scholars in the United Kingdom, which has been reported by the BBC, I turned to look back at my own society to see whether such kind of a process also exists in our school, which contribute to gender inequality. When I look at this, I discover that our own educational system are also guilty of creating such stereotypes. Now, in her work on Mizoram, Lakshmi Bhatia was examining how the school curriculum shape gender personalities. So taking out extracts from the school textbooks, she brings out a number of phrases, a number of statements, which end up creating ideas of inequality between the male and female. So these ideas are internalized with the students, are carried to their homes, and then into adulthood, and put into practice. Therefore, gender stereotypes and gender inequality persist in the society. Now, looking at my own state of Meghalaya, I discover that a much more serious form of discrimination is being propagated by educational system. Because this is being done not at the level of the primary school or elementary school, where the young are exposed to gendered ideas, but this is being done at the level of college, of higher secondary school education. I bring this book here with me today. This is a book called The Teaching of Elders. It is a book which is prescribed. This is a translation of a book which was published in 1907 in Khasi and translated into English by one Khasi novelist. And this book is a prescribed text. When I was a student of Guwahati University in my pre-university days 50 years ago, and 50 years down the line, the same book is being prescribed for students of class 11 and 12 in their MIL, Modern Indian Languages, Khasi Indian Languages. And when I look at some of the poems that is contained in this book, you will find that this book has ideas that are highly disrespectful of women. Just to give you an example of the kind of ideas propagated in this book, one of the poems reads, "Don't give a woman too much freedom, for worldly wise she can never become. Her womanly grace will degenerate, for she unreasonably argue and castigate. She won't bother of consequences big and small. She won't realize what is right, what is wrong. Don't give her too much liberty, for she may lose her dignity." Translated from the Khasi by Bijoya Saumian. I think these words are extremely jarring to me, and I'm sure many feminist oriented scholars, I hope, would feel the same. And yet, this is a book which is prescribed for the college students in Nehru. And when I discussed the matter with a few students who were doing this course and asked them, how does a teacher teach these ideas, I was shocked to hear that there was no critical engagement with these ideas, but students were expected to learn and memorize them and write their exams. And further, looking at the other poems in this particular book, I find that this author is highly contemptuous of widows and childless women. A couple that is childless, a man is not blamed for it. It's a wife who's blamed for it. So he says, those who are childless and can't procreate are surely cantankerous and intemperate. Just like an empty vessel that is constant and lucky, your chances of progress shall hinder and stymie. So people with defects, remember, are not meant to participate in religious rites and government. So the continuing propagation of such gender stereotypes by schools and a culture of silence by a socialization process not only perpetuates the subordination of women, but also contributes to the marginalization from state and public policies. In one of my papers, I had written to show how state policies, which are framed, which apparently were projected as being favorable to the interests of women, actually, closer reading between the lines, reveal that women's interests are not addressed at all. And I think this kind of marginalization of women from the public policies and programs really has its roots in this kind of socialization process that we have been subjected to. So therefore, it is high time, therefore, for us to come up with reforms. So this brings us to the question, should customary law be insulated from reforms? The question assumes significance because we find that when we talk about marginalization of women and calling for reforms in the law, most of the time the argument given out by those who support customary laws and practices, say that we cannot really afford to change customary laws and practices because they're rooted in tradition, because they're backed by sanctions, giving the impression that they are static, they are unchanging. And so the kind of argument which has been given, say by the state of Nagaland, that bringing about reforms or allowing women to participate in political participation would be violative of Article 371A, which granted by Constitution. So we find that these kind of protective mechanisms also puts women from tribal societies outside the orbit of reformist laws framed for the rest of the country. So therefore, it is important for us to raise this question before this August House to say, should we continue to insulate customary laws from reforms because it's violative of Article 371A, violative of the 6th schedule as applied in the state of Meghalaya and as parts of Assam, or because it is violative of the customary laws and practices which has been ordained by our forefathers and practiced in time immemorial. It is important for us to raise this question if we really are interested in women's empowerment, in creating a gender-equal society where both men and women have equal access to all the resources, the opportunities the society has. So I, for one, would like to iterate that shielding of customary laws from constitutional reforms reinforces patriarchy and the subordination of women. Of course, there are many aspects of customary law that are positive and need to be protected. But it is also a fact that there are many other aspects of customary law that are highly discriminatory towards women and therefore needs to be corrected. Okay? So we are presented with a dual picture. On the one hand, you have customary law which is positive, aspects of it. On the other hand, we have customary laws that are not positive of it. So therefore, to adopt a blanket policy of not reforming customary law because it's violative of Article 371A, 371G of the 6th schedule, or because it goes against the tradition, because customary law is supposed to be an integral part of our culture, somehow it does not hold any water as far as I'm concerned. Yet, as I said just now, a common refrain among those who are against reform of customary law is that it should not interfere with what has been granted or ordained by our forefathers, which gives the impression that customary law does not change. But if you really examine the operation of customary law across societies in Northeast India, you find this kind of argument again does not hold true, because customary laws have been changing. For example, the dormitory system among the Nagas, the Garos, no longer exists in the form in which it did. With the introduction of education, with increasing entry of students into higher learning, the dormitory system is waning. Also, if you look at the system of kinship and marriage, the marriage rules of village endogamy or clan exogamy, you find this is also changing. It is no longer practiced in the same form in which it was done. Yet, this does not in any way really, devalue or undermine our customary law and practices, despite these changes. And even in the system of dispute settlement, more and more people now are no longer taking recourse to the traditional method of dispute settlement, just as trial by water or trial by fire, which are supposed to be relying on divine intervention. People now are going to the police to complain about the others. People are going to the formal courts. So all these changes are coming up, which just goes to show that customary law is not immune to change. But as I said just now, this does not mean to say that customary law is no longer important. Especially in today's context, customary law is still very much important. Identity depends upon it. To get a birth certificate or a marriage certificate, in many places you have to go to the Gaunbura, you have to go to the village council, the village community. Even for your passport in Shillong, or to get your house rented out, you have to go to the traditional institutions, which is based on customary laws and practices. And your identity as a person also is defined by your ethnicity, not defined by your education, not defined by the official position that you hold. So it just goes to show the customary law is still very much important. So my argument here is that while we need to reform those repressive aspects of customary law that impinges on the rights of women, that perpetuates gender inequality, there is also a need for us to respect customary law, and by at the same time bringing about changes in those repressive aspects will in no way undermine customary law. So the final analysis, what I'd like to say is that it is necessary for us, therefore, to take a very closed and careful examination of the working of customary law and practices over time, see how it has operated, see how it has fared, and whether really the argument that has been put out, by those who subscribe to the idea that customary law is immutable and changing, and those say that it violates the provisions of the Constitution, which are charted out to safeguard the interests of tribes. I would say that the argument does not really hold good, because customary law has been changing and people have not been opposed to it. And in fact, the only opposition to reforms in customary law and practices only relates to those areas which tends to challenge gender inequality. When it comes to areas that do not challenge gender inequality, there is no protest, no debate by our male elected bodies, by our male politicians, or even our male scholars. But only in those areas which challenge gender inequality, the protests are made out. And the importance of customary law and practices as something which is sacrosanct, has been brought to the fore. It's important for us to read between the lines, understand the nuances and the way in which customary law operates, to be able to come up, with a good policy that will be directed towards preserving the good and correcting the bad. It seems to me that these kind of opposition, resistance to women's participation in politics, by arguing that it violates the customary law and practices, is based, A, on a wrong understanding of how customary law and practices operate, and B, on a wrong understanding of the concept of women empowerment. Because when we talk about women empowerment, there's always a tendency to imagine that if women are empowered, women will challenge men's dominance, men's authority. I think they fail to understand that it is not challenging male dominance that what the women want. All they want is, for a gender equal society where men and women can come together as equal partners and work for the common good. I think if we understand the concept of women empowerment as something which is directed at achieving gender equality, which is a highly desirable value, and which is in consonance with the concept of social justice and democracy, and in consonance with the principles of human rights, then I see no conflict between giving women right to participate in politics, and also at the same time, protect customary laws and practices. And in fact, I think subscribing to some of the good practices of international law, those relating to humanism, those relating to social justice, will further enhance the customary laws and practices and enrich our culture and society. Thank you very much.
No words could express how thankful we are towards you, ma'am, for coming such a long way, and we will always treasure your valuable time. Thank you so much once again, Professor Tiplut Nongbri, retired Professor of Sociology, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, for sharing us your in-depth knowledge on gender, customary law, and women's representation in politics. Moving forward with our program, now we have a speech from our function president, and I would like to request Professor Naorem Joykumar Singh, retired Professor of History, Manipur University, to address the gathering.
Very good afternoon. Well, I am standing here not to give the lecture. Simply, I stand here to perform my ritualistic duties assigned to me by the GK Foundation. Professor Tiplut Nongbri, the retired professor of sociology, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, then the chairman of the GK Foundations, whom I, with great respect and love, always I address her, Itaima, and the distinguished personalities of the state of Manipur, who established themselves as an authority in their respective professions and these areas, and the members of the JK Foundations, then respected invitees, ladies and gentlemen. Well, to me, here in the invitation card, it is said, third Gangmumei Kamei Memorial Lecture. But to me, it is a kind of a rituals performed by the GK Foundations in order to recall and to remember Professor Gangmumei Kamei. And I always consider him as the institutions, as an institution. To himself, he was an institution. And through his intellectual alacrity, when he was alive, he led the society, he led the academic world of the state in northeastern India to a very, in a right perspective. So through this platform, the JK Foundations, through this platform now, we are trying to remember Professor Gangmumei Kamei. I always consider him because now, just after his death, Professor Gangmumei Kamei became more and more relevant in the society, in the politics, in education, even in the resource work of the state of Manipur. Well, just now, Professor Tiplut Nongbri, she gave a very good lecture on the gender customary law and women's representation in the politics. I am fully convinced that I am not a competent person to give remark on his highly illuminating and thought-provoking speech. But taking the opportunities of her presence here, I would like to share some of my thoughts and ideas with her, particularly in the context of the women's movement, in the aspects of the women's movement. Well, just now, Professor Nongbri has said very nicely about the inequality between the men and women and the activism of the women in India and particularly in the northeastern regions and through a global aspect also. As a student of history and as a research scholar in the field of social movement, I have also done some small work on the women's movement in Manipur. And when we say women movement, if I think Professor Nongbri also will agree with me, and when we say women's movement, it is something confined mainly on the enhancement of the status of the women in their respective society. Even in America also, even in England also, because I have come through so many these things. But whereas coming to the context of the northeastern regions, particularly in the context of Manipur, I think you have also mentioned in your speech, I have come across a number of differences between the women's movements in Manipur and women's in other parts of India, so also in other parts of the world. So this is the basic difference between the women's movements of Manipur and the women's movements in other parts of the world. Well, if we, just now we have mentioned, because I don't like to repeat again, but right from the colonial, even from the pre-colonial period also, the women of Manipur played a very important role in every aspect of the life of the society, right from the prehistoric period also. And particularly in the colonial and the post-colonial, even to the post-merger period also, the women of Manipur played a very, very important role in every stages of the life of the society, in the politics, then in other areas also. So this is something which I have come across, a kind of differences in the nature of the movements between the women's movement here in Manipur in other parts. Here in Manipur, I find that the women's, they never considered about their status. They never raised this issue. About the status of the women is never raised in Manipur. Rather, they always considered themselves as the guardian of the society. So this is the basic difference between the what is called women's movements in other parts of India, even in the world also. Because they never, they always consider themselves as the guardian of the society, as a protector of the society, as a security guard of the society. So this is something, say for example, we are talking a lot about Rani Gaidilok. Now she considered herself as one of the greatest freedom fighters in India. And throughout her life, she never raised the issue of the status of the woman. She never raised about the question of the enhancement of the country. Rather, she came out with arm in her hand to protect against what is called draconian law and a draconian what is called administrative machinery of the colonial administration. So this is one of the best examples. This is one of the best examples. So therefore, I always consider, perhaps I may be wrong, I always consider that the inequality, the discrimination between the male and the female, it is the creation of the manfolk. When I read the Hindu religions, about the religious book of Hinduism, when I read some religious book of the Christianity, when I read some religious book of the Islam, I have across a number of evidences. Say for example, women who it is, because from that book I come to know that the women's means the Adam and Eve. So Adam came out from the third rib of Eve, from Adam. Eve came out from Adam, from the third rib of Adam. So therefore, this particular element should be called woman. So in this respect, it is mentioned in the what is called in the Genesis. It is said that the women should follow the path of the male. So also in the case of Quran, that is also mentioned. But except only in Hinduism, to a certain extent, some kind of a liberal ideas was given in the Hindu religion. So from these things, I come to know that the inequality or a discrimination between the male and the woman, it was the creation of the male, because in Hindu religion, in the early Vedic period, there was no discrimination. But the discrimination was started from the later part of the Vedic religion, Vedic period. So these things, these aspects also should be included when we discuss about the what is called the inequality, about the discriminations, about the nature of the movement, about the role of the participation of women in society. Say, for example, there is also very interesting things. About a few years back, some women contested election in the case in Manipur, and they were defeated. At that time, I was in university, and with the help of some of my young friends, I have met a study about the nature of the electoral system, the nature of the pattern of the what is called the casting of vote. And I found that, most of the women's, they did not cast vote in favor of women candidates. So this aspect also I have come across, from my research work. So therefore, there is some kind of a what is called some kind of a missing link, in the study of the women's movement. So this aspect that I would like to share with you. So therefore, I always, because I am very happy, your presence here, it gives more meaningful in the what's called in this August gathering. At the same time, as a very learned person, I would like to request you to give some kind of suggestions to the members of the what's called JK Foundations, especially this Song Kamei. He was one of the architects of the JK Foundation. At the same time, he is also a driver in the driver's seat of the vehicle of JK Kamei, and to proceed further so that we would be able to give also glaring examples about the performance of Professor Gangmumei when he was alive in the Bisol society. With these few words, once again, I would like to thank all the invitees, all the big personalities, all the these things to come over here just to make this function a grand success. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Naorem Joykumar Singh, for your kind words. And now we will be having a vote of thanks, and I would like to request Dr. Jamgongmei Kamei to deliver the vote of thanks.
Once again, a very good afternoon to everyone. Respected President of today's function, Professor N. Joykumar Singh, retired Professor of History, Manipur University, retired Professor, respected Professor Tiplut Nongbri, retired Professor of Sociology, JNU New Delhi, Chairman of GK Foundation, Srimati Lanshailu Kamei, esteemed invitees, eminent academicians, professors, social activists, scholars, leaders, and my dear colleagues and friends. Taking this privilege, I, on behalf of GK Foundation, would like to express a profound gratitude to Professor Tiplut Nongbri, speaker of today's function, for delivering a talk on gender, customary law, and women's representation in politics. Thank you, ma'am, for enlightening us and sharing your valuable insight. I feel your speech has left a lot of food for thought, and I'm sure everyone present here have the same feeling. We are extremely fortunate to have you here in our midst. I would like to express immense gratitude to Professor N. Joykumar Singh for the presidential remark. He is not only a close associate of late Professor Gangmumei Kamei, but also an advisor of GK Foundation. Thank you, sir, for being our backbone in our endeavor and constantly motivating, inspiring, and guiding us. I also want to thank Mr. Som Kamei, Postmaster General, Northeast 2 Region, for giving a warm welcome address. Let me also extend my sincere thanks to Mrs. Mazakon Kamei, HOD Sociology, Pranabananda Women's College, Dimapur, for the elaborate introduction of our speaker. A warm gratitude to all the esteemed invitees who took out time from their busy schedule to attend this program and making it a grand success. Let me also take a moment to acknowledge the immense contribution of Dr. N. Jiten Singh, Mr. Ramananda, Ms. Lanchame Golmei. We are indebted for the time you have given. And my special thanks and gratitude to Honorable MLA Sri Murthanglur, also to General Himalaya, Sri Pradip Fanjaubam, Srimati Alka, Chairperson of Women's Commission Manipur, for attending the program. Your presence is greatly precious and valuable. I also thank all the online guests for your participation in the lecture. It may not be fair if I did not mention and thank the chairman of GK Foundation, Mrs. G. Lanshailu Kamei, for her unstinted support and commitment, and also to Dr. Ram Kamei, Dr. Jenpiru Kamei, Mr. Som Kamei, Mr. Shyam Kamei, and the entire team of the family for the devoted time and energy for this program. I apologize if I missed out somebody and unwillingly to take their names. Finally, once again, thank you to everyone assembled here for making this program a huge success. Have a pleasant evening ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jamgongmei Kamei, for your vote of thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of our official formal program. Thank you so much. And I would like to request everyone to proceed towards the left-hand side of the lawn for a high tea. And I would like to request our media person to kindly join us with a high tea. Media person.
Thank you so much.
Yesterday, me and my wife were talking. We were just discussing. Oh, hello, hi, yeah, hi. Yeah, yeah. Hi, hello, hi. Yeah, yeah.
They want me to listen to you.
Yeah, I have a connection with the first time when I got elected as a legislator was through the that time Imphal China was that was his actually.
He's now in BJP.
Right now I'm in BJP.
Excuse me, ma'am. It was very interesting.
Yeah, it was for us.
Ada